You are on.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. We are very appreciative of your time and the time that you're taking to attend today. And for those people who can't connect tonight or today, we are recording the webinar and we will be sending the a link to you. This webinar will be held in English and Spanish, and in the bottom part of the screen, there is an email and this will, el webinario será en inglés y en This webinar is to talk about the independent audit of the SQL mine in the Salar de Atacama in Chile, and we will speak about the outcomes of the audit and how the transparency of an audit against the IRMA standard offers and how it can be used by the stakeholders to improve the social and economic and environmental practices, as well as positive legacies of the operation. The goal of the webinar is to offer a safe space for people to be able to ask questions to the panelists. All of your questions can be asked with the Q&A button for Q&A in Zoom, and only the IRMA team will be able to see them. And our panelists are Aimee Boulanger, who is our IRMA Executive Director, Javier Silva, who is the Sustainability Manager for SQM, and myself, Adan Olivares Castro, who I am the regional leader for IRMA in the Americas. So first, our panelists will speak. Those of them who are all of the attendees can ask their questions through the Q&A function of Zoom, and we will use the last 20 minutes of our webinar to answer your questions. And now I would like to give the floor to our Executive Director, Aimee Boulanger.
Thank you so much, Adan. Really appreciate that. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. Grateful to have you here. And I'm going to take a moment to share with you some of the basics about how the IRMA system works first. And then we'll share more specifically about the SQM audit. So why is a system like IRMA needed in the world? We live in a world right now where increasing demand is pressing for lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, iron ore, and other materials, especially those associated with energy transition. It's absolutely essential that we deal with the issues of consumption and the inequitable use of resources, and that we address circular economy, creating a more level playing field for recycling and materials reuse and things which last longer. And it's not just driven by all new extraction. But that said, we know that to make the energy transition in particular, there is this increasing press for lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and others. And At that same time, we have indigenous and other communities under stress from the impacts of climate change already. We have increasing drought and floods, risks to our drinking water, risks to indigenous culture, and deep distrust that exists between many communities where mining happens. We have end brands at the same time looking to address more responsible sourcing, asking for transparency and to understand their supply chain, and increase legal expectation that they do understand their supply chains and that they use their purchasing power to reduce harm. And that sets a context for the world that we're in right now as IRMA works to do its work. Next slide, so Clara, thank you. So what is IRMA's work in the world here? It provides the world's most rigorous and detailed standard for mining. It's stronger than any individual country's laws. But even as it describes best practices, it's not pass-fail. It works to create value for any mining company to come in and to show where it is now and show improvement over time. It applies anywhere in the world with the full range of mined materials from lithium to gold, nickel, copper, iron ore, platinum, and more. The assessment is at each mine site level, so we encourage companies to make a commitment that they will have all of their sites audited against the IRMA standard, but they need to talk about the performance of each one and what's happening on the ground for the landscapes and people who rely on that region. And it's the equally governed. It is the only mining standard for large-scale mines, which is equally governed by civil society working alongside private sector leaders. This gives you a sense of more than 20 chapters that are in IRMA's standard. The attention is that we're not choosing worker health and safety or clean water. It's not protecting clean air or indigenous rights, but to give a sense of performance across a full range of the issues where mining has impact and also opportunity to do good. The governance of IRMA, as I mentioned, works equally across 6 houses who share this leadership role in offering IRMA as a tool and value for all, and also accountability for each. As these leaders make decisions in IRMA, they make a commitment to not leaving any house behind. So in addition to each having 2 votes, if there were 2 no votes from any sector, that would stop a decision. They will not leave a house behind and seek to create value and accountability for all. Okay, Clara, but it's not just those who are at that table. There is a robust membership of customers coming in, working to connect with mining companies who are stepping up to demonstrate their increased transparency and make commitments to improve practices. And this is also true in civil society with increasing number of NGOs who are working to reduce harm at the mine level and address climate change. These NGOs are in particular referencing when mining has an overlap with energy transition and the materials that are needed for energy transition. So while many recognize the impacts of mining, they also are very much asserting the need to transition to cleaner forms of energy and move away from fossil fuels. But even as they do so, there is this concern that there will be that responsible mining or green mining may in some way be a myth. There is distrust at this moment here, and IRMA operates in that world of trying to be of value to all and to be a reference point for all for greater trusted information around mining companies' performance, and also creating value for companies to improve social and environmental responsibility. We recognize that any voluntary initiative will not replace the deep need and higher value of the laws and regulations that apply to all operators. We know that the work we do is not as important as the work of government. We seek to be a tool and a support to governments increasing their work to set laws that all operators should follow, and appreciate that in the United States, the Biden administration has reference to IRMA in its supply chain report. The European Parliament, as it's looked at battery legislation, has reference to IRMA, and IRMA also named in the climate talks as a tool to address harm at the top of the supply chain for energy transition. But governments are using IRMA as well as they seek to make clear their rights to free, prior, informed consent and asserting the rights through the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, as referenced in the IRMA standard as well, and increasingly expected across the private sector and business transactions as well. So how does the IRMA audit work? The IRMA begins for a mining company starting with the self-assessment tool, where a company can audit itself, get a sense of how they would perform, and use that to make improvements even before going to audit. Our lead purpose is not to score, but to drive value for companies to improve. They cannot make any claims, though, at the self-assessment level. So when they move to independent assessment, that's when claims can be made, as we're sharing today. And that's where verified results are made publicly. The audits are publicly noticed when they begin. This is where anyone can share perspectives with the auditors, mine workers, communities around, Indigenous people who have cultural heritage in the region. Auditors interview people beyond the mine site, having interviews with workers and civil society without the company present. And the reports from this are detailed and made freely available, as you'll find with the SQM report this week. The mining companies globally are increasingly engaging in the IRMA system. There are now more than 70 mining companies representing nearly 100 sites in 29 countries and more than 50 mined materials who have formally registered using the self-assessment tool. The first 15 audits now underway in a range of countries as described here. And there are now, this is the 4th audit report published, but many more are coming on its way right now to meet this market demand. Please watch in the coming months for release of 6 Anglo-American audits in Brazil and South Africa, for another lithium audit by Livent in Argentina, for the surveillance updates in Zimbabwe and Mexico from mines earlier audited. Back in June, we released the audit report for Albemarle's lithium operation, and new audits underway in Brazil, Senegal, and Mozambique. Now to shift over to what I know you're most interested to hear, which is about the SQM audit report. SQM completed their self-assessment using the IRMA standard in June 2021 during COVID. The processes were slowed down during this time before auditors could get on site, but auditors from the firm CVS completed their desk review of SQM's operation in March 2022. And then went on site to do a site review of operations and interview stakeholders in May and June of 2022. In the years since that time, the company has used what IRMA offers as an optional corrective action period to make improvements to their performance, which auditors have then gone and verified again. And yesterday, the audit report was released for public review. You'll find that report on IRMA's website. You'll find that it's about 100 pages long with detailed information. You can find in the summary at the beginning the scores for each chapter, more than 20 chapters. And then you'll also find overall scores. And Clara, you can move ahead on that one. IRMA allows an overall achievement level as described on this slide. To be IRMA transparency means a company has been audited against the IRMA standard and simply shares its score. It doesn't have to have a particular achievement level. But at IRMA 50 or 75, this is where a company is at least substantially meeting all of the critical requirements in the document. And they are also meeting at least 50 or 75% achievement in each of the 4 main areas of the IRMA standard. In this case, SQM has reached the IRMA 75 level of achievement. And if readers want to know more about that performance, they can go into each of the chapters in the IRMA standard in this report and see where the company in particular has met things and where they're not meeting things and where there's room for improvement. So how you can use this report: for diverse readers, community members, mine workers, NGOs can use it to better understand areas of strength, where places for improvement, ask for more information, and advocate for changes. Customers to the company and investors can better understand SQM's operation and better understand affected communities and worker perspectives and use their leverage to seek improvements. Other mining companies can learn from SQM, both their strengths and their challenges and perspectives from them. And government can also get a better sense of the site's performance and the community input, and also use the IRMA standard as a way to strengthen laws for other operators in their regions. For any of you who have questions about the operation or want to know how to file a complaint, if you disagree with the findings of auditors, you can find, again, the audit report on IRMA's website. SQM is offered to be a resource to answer questions about their own performance, and we encourage people to reach out to SQM directly if you're asking about how is the mine performing, what are they doing to meet expectations in the IRMA standard. If you have questions about how the audit was done, you can direct these to the audit firm CVS, and please note their email here on the slide. You can file a complaint or provide feedback to IRMA directly. Spanish or English are fine, including WhatsApp. And you can always ask any question of any sort directly to IRMA, and we'll help you get it connected to the people who can answer your questions. And with that, I'm going to shift now to allowing SQM to speak. On this, I want to pause, though, and share that previously, in the previous 3 audit report releases, we have not had the company on. We've intended to have IRMA's presentation of the audit process and the presentation of the report to the public be independent and not be used in any way as a promotion of any individual company. However, in our June release of the Albemarle report, we received feedback from a number of listeners that you wished to have heard the perspective of the company being audited. So in respect to that, in our effort to be responsive to what diverse Indigenous rights holders and other stakeholders are asking for, we've asked SQM to provide perspective here, and we appreciate that they've agreed to do that. So I'm going to give space now to Javier. And then Adan is also going to hold space for the concerns of civil society who do not have a formal speaker presenting today. So with that, Javier, I turn to you.
Well, thank you very much to all of you attending this meeting from wherever you are. And I would like to talk to you briefly about our auditing process, which was done under the very thorough IRMA standard. So it was a 2-year process. First, our company decided to be assessed under the standard, and then we needed to learn from other mines that had already performed the process, and that was critical. And we needed to study and improve our internal processes. We needed to talk to our stakeholders, and we created a formal channel of communication so that we could improve the opinions about the mining companies. You know, mining companies tend to look inside how to improve our costs, how to improve our yields, how to search for markets. But if we are to have broader view and how to have a more responsible operation, we were able to open a new view that allowed us to improve. This was, we need to recognize that we are truly happy to see the outcome of the audit. However, we must not overlook the fact that this is also a great responsibility. You can see the report because it was published, and you can see what was our score in each of the audit items. So as has been said in the beginning, this standard is a tool for dialogue and transparency. So in 2020, we began with online monitoring, with atmosphere monitors, etc. But after the report with the audit, what we sought was to continue moving forward under a responsible action. So it is not only about technology and measurement equipment, but it is also about governance. It is also about positive legacy, about the community. So we need to change our view as to how the mining industry has to be in the future. We have to recognize that all of our lithium operations in Chile are under IRMA, which makes us very proud because we are showing to the world, particularly to the electromobility industry, that in Chile, lithium operations are moving forward. We are moving forward to show what we are doing. We are willing to submit to the review of independent third parties, which turns our reports even more serious. And on the same token, it shows us where do we need to make improvements and what are the next steps that we need to take. So when you look at the report, you will see what our outcomes are. Certainly, there are several challenges, and we are working on that all the more with our neighboring communities, with the free and informed consent. We have found a way to be good neighbors. We need to recognize the parties as members of a territory. They need to be, we need to recognize that all the value that is generated from an operation needs to be shared with everyone who is involved, and we need to be able to maintain good and sound relationships with the communities, with our contractors, with our workers, with the unions. We need to be able to maintain open dialogue with them. However, although we have made big strides, we cannot take things for granted. We cannot say that just because we have had good results, it means that we are already there. On the contrary, we need to continue with very rigorous plans, with open dialogue. We need to provide to the communities the tools that they need so that they can also understand the responsibility they have on the territory and their responsibility on the Salar de Atacama. But it is our responsibility to provide them with all the information so that they can be rest assured that they have the right information. So we have opened our websites and our information channels so that they can use that information. We have spoken to them about safety and security, about due diligence in Salar de Atacama. But the challenge now is not to just keep this one single snapshot, but rather continue working into the future and see how we will continue to listening to them. But we need to listen actively and to establish a two-way conversation. So this is what we see in our operation. We know what the main challenges are. We know what are the main challenges in the Atacama operation. Our challenge for the future is to have an operation that will minimize the impacts as much as possible. We know that we are a mine unlike any other in the world. We have the rocks, we have the brines, we extract lithium from the salt crop. So we need to have, or to be very careful with the processes. So we need to be able to provide the information to all the stakeholders that are involved in the process to make sure that they will be walking the right path. In Chile, we are reviewing our lithium strategy at SQM. We are hoping to continue with our operation until 2030, and the audit is the first step to give us a roadmap of what we need to do. Within the next 18 months, we hope to have made progress in each of the aspects and the items of the audit. We have several channels of communications, like my own email, my own contact information. We have our website. We have publications. We have channels of communication that we share with the communities. And although we have still several aspects to be improved, the community is willing to cooperate and to get involved with us with the goal of making our operation a sustainable and transparent one that will be online with improving the quality of life of people.
Thank you, Javier, for your comments. We acknowledge that there are leaders in the civil society who are worried and concerned about the industrial extraction of lithium in Salar de Atacama, and they express their concern on water impact, as well as the rights of the original peoples, the cultural heritage, biodiversity, and many other matters, because Salar de Atacama is one of the driest places on Earth for many affected communities by mining, especially the indigenous ones or original people. Trusting mining companies is absolutely broken. Many of them have not felt they have been given any benefits, but they are undergoing generations of lost culture and damage to the land that they depend on. For many of these communities, IRMA is something new. They do not trust in it yet. The audit has been seen as only a benefit of the private sector. And many of them ask themselves if IRMA will just be providing the permits for the damaging impact of mining and supporting the green image referenced as greenwashing. We are trying to develop trust of several holders of the rights of the original people, the workers of mining, and other leaders of social or civil society in order to provide detailed information on the yielding of the mines. As of one, some commitments may starting good practices in operations, because it is possible that many of the title holders and right holders of the indigenous people have not felt any comfortable yet to speak, and we hope they review the report and get in touch with us if they believe it does not truly reflect yielding, just as they know it. We appreciate SQM having undergone this audit for this specific mine against the 400 requirements of the IRMA standard. And we encourage to continue working with the rights holders of the original or indigenous people, as well as others who would like to know more about your operations.
So now we will shift to discussion and questions if people have them. And thank you, IRMA team members who have been receiving questions in the question and answer features. So any listeners today who have questions that you'd like to have directed at either Javier with SQM or with IRMA, please type your questions into the chat. You may type in Spanish or English, and we'll receive those questions and strive to answer them here. And of course, you may email any questions also that you have that you're not comfortable to share with us today. But Adan, can you see if there are any questions in the chat now?
Thank you, Aimee. Well, the first question, and I may answer this in Spanish. Let me look at them. These have been explained in the session, but can you explain the difference between the SQM mine grade and the Albemarle one? As far as I understand, SQM reached a higher percentage of the requirements. Which were the areas it was actually better? I can provide the answer here. Although IRMA provides achievement levels that are in categories such as IRMA 50, IRMA 75, it is important to pay attention in individual achievements of each mine. For each chapter, we can see that every place is unique in the way they manage their operations, and the differences on their operations are reflected in this different scoring. Although Albemarle mine has achieved their IRMA 50 achievement and SQM received one of 75, scores, general scores of each mine have a 5% difference only. And this is the most important part of all. We have another question here. This is for Javier, SQM. Which are the areas in which you're more interested in to improve the operation? Thank you for the question. At a personal level, I believe the challenge, as I said before in my presentation, is to progress in social responsibility, make sure and strengthen dialogues with our communities, trust, building trust as of what we have been working on in our agreement or way of interacting with our presence in community, in order to start creating a sound operation that is according to what we normally do. There is a gap in here, and I think it is reflected in the report, and this is what we want to focus on. Perfect, thank you, Javier. Now, this question is for our Executive Director of IRMA, Aimee Boulanger. I'm going to say it in English then.
Yeah, we cannot say that all of the results shared in the audit are correct. What they are the auditor's best effort to understand the operation at the time that they are reviewing. They're reviewing in-depth hundreds, sometimes thousands of pages of evidence uploaded by the company. They are going on site for about a week in a team of 4 to 5 auditors with cultural competency and technical expertise, but it is still a slice in time at the given site. I'm sure Javier would say he would like to say much more, and at times different than what the auditors have written in their report. And I know that some workers would likely say the same, and community residents. It's why we are so interested to have people read the report, to talk with the company, to communicate with auditors and IRMA if you think it's fundamentally wrong or if there are gaps missing. But I can say that this is more information than we have about most any operation in the world because of the level of detail that's been sought here and the sharing and disclosure, which exceeds most legal requirements in any country. So with this level of information, it gives us an opportunity to go through to really try to understand this operation and to ask for accountability where there are impacts and improvements there. So while we can't assure that everything is accurate and correct, it's certainly the best attempt to do that and to increase access. And simply by having the transparency on this, we can now have a dialogue about this information. The company can add added perspective that they want to share on their performance, and workers and other stakeholders and indigenous rights holders can share their insights on the operation as well. The company will need to do a surveillance audit again, which is a check-in in 12 to 18 months. That's an opportunity for them to share improvements that they've made, but it's also a chance to make sure that there aren't significant changes. There will need to be a re-audit again to verify performance again to hold achievement level at the 3-year point as well.
Thank you very much, Aimee. The next question is for Javier. There's something in this audit that surprised you about the process itself? I would say that, speaking of the revision or the review, the amount of documents and the level of detail of the documents that we had to provide was incredible. Thousands of pages that are reflected in this 150 summary of the report, but everything backing it up, everything is a lot. It's 2 years work. So it's not a standard that you need to aspire to be able to do in a short term or little time. We need to actually convey to the mining companies that want to be measured through the IRMA standard. We need to tell them they have to generate a dedicated team. They need to have governability on sustainability management, accompanying the process, learning of the process, and installing capacity to the inside of the company to obviously improve. And we're going to see the results in environment. We knew this was what we needed to work in. And in the results we see is one of the greatest and highest scores we've obtained. So it's great results. Also the expectations and hopes of the world in general from us. Excellent. Thank you very much, Javier. Next question is more a clarifying sentence. Aimee mentioned a little bit about it already, but I want to verify this. So the question is, when will the company be audited again? I want to be clear about that answer. IRMA demands to carry out a surveillance audit 12 to 18 months after the issuing of the report of the audit. The scope of a surveillance audit is a little bit shorter or reduced, and it is focused mainly in understanding changes in the operation and confirming systems have been kept, as well as the observed yielding by the auditors during the initial auditing. They also review again critical requirements to make sure a drop has not happened in the yielding of these requirements. And so the next question, I give you the floor, Javier, for this. Somebody from our audience would like to know, how does SQM respond to criticism or worrisome expressed or documented by civil society? And how are you expecting to approach them in practice? Well, in recommendations or perceptions we may have about the operation in the Salar de Atacama, we saw the due diligence process in the same report, and we have had to modify our future plan, especially as it's been said, water is what motivated us, backed us up, and provided us a foundation to make decisions such as our production plan in the future that is going after a zero impact in water, to have it neutral. Therefore, the challenge in research and development on where to focus our efforts to demonstrate with results. Actually, the same topic motivated us to produce in a 50% extraction of water, reducing 25% the 20%, because we're not expecting any promises as audience, as public. We want facts. So we are carrying out concrete measures of sustainability in the items or the categories that our people are asking for. And therefore, the challenge we have is to be able to be concrete and progress in our goals with the technology challenges this means in order to completely respond to all of the uncertainties that we may have in population. Thank you, Javier. Next question is for Aimee. I'm going to say it in English, so.
Well, I agree with the premise of the question, which is that we are sitting here facing conflicts and competing priorities that it's impossible to choose between. And the impacts of those choices are not felt equitably. There are many who will say that the lithium from operations like this in the Atacama are going into electric vehicles, which then have the important work to replace fossil fuel vehicles around the world. And the cost of an individual electric vehicle is prohibitive for many people like those who live closest to the Atacama. And so those who live with the impacts are not often the beneficiaries of the benefit there. And yet we live in a world where we're all suffering with the impacts of climate stress. For those who live near industrial extraction, they have climate stress as any others might, but then also the impacts from industrial extraction, which can persist for centuries, including the impacts to water, and that these impacts may perpetuate far longer than the duration of a mine there. This is why the IRMA water chapter speaks to both water quality and quantity, and the monitoring that Javier has spoken to. There are many who are asking if the extraction of lithium brine is a direct impact to surface water and groundwater resources. And we know this debate persists out there, and it's important that it continue to look at this because the Atacama is one of the driest places on Earth, and also this reserve of lithium that the world needs for energy transition. So this attention to water in the IRMA standard is essential. IRMA's standard is the most rigorous look in the mining space at how water is impacted through industrial extraction. It's drawn from water quality expectations in the United States, Canada, Australia, and South Africa, looking at commonalities between 4 mining countries and their expectations for protecting water resources. However, the IRMA standard opens in October for full global review, and we encourage people to look at the water chapter and see if you believe it needs to be strengthened further. And we encourage you in particular to look at the annexes there as well, which look at water quality expectations for how water is used for agriculture, for fisheries and aquatic life, for drinking water and communities. We're very aware that what is not drinking water today may be needed only in 5 years, 10 years for drinking water in the future. And I look to my colleagues at IRMA. If anyone else, Michelle Smith or others, want to add to that, then please do.
Thank you, Aimee. Next question is for Javier. Which is the most important physical change and visible change before and after an audit of IRMA standard? Internally, and I think for any organization, I would say, is to have the backup and the resources in order to implement changes. IRMA standard, if the company commits all the way from the director to the workers, it means that resources are provided that they need to implement what the standard is requiring. Obviously, this is a change that clearly we saw. We had voluntary commitments before, but after this audit, we have public results and provides us with the strength to the insight to progress in the gaps that we find. As I said before in my answer, water reduction are born from here also, from this process that we're improving and our sustainable development plan. And with this, physically, we have created and strengthening environmental areas, energy areas, hydrology areas, in order to be capable to respond to the challenges the standard sets. Thank you, Javier. Next question is for Michelle Smith, who is our director of the standard and the assurance system. So the question, I will now read it in English.
Thanks, Adan. And we're missing just the first part with the conversion to translations. So I'm just going to reread. How are the communities of interest that are included in the IRMA standard identified? And this is in the context that the area of influence the project could be much larger than estimated. It's a really good question. There is a collaborative effort that takes place, starting with the stakeholder identification and community engagement plan that the mine site has put together, which is presented by the mine to the auditors for their consideration. The auditors are then asked to prepare their own independent identification of stakeholders and also an engagement plan. And that engagement plan for the auditors is typically focused on the audit activities themselves. So identifying the best methods to announce the audit and to engage with stakeholders, whether it be communities, government officials, NGOs, or others. Putting together that plan also requires reaching out, oftentimes to communities, community representatives, knowledgeable people in the community who can help auditors who are oftentimes not from the area understand who should be invited to participate in the audit. Even though the audit is open to anyone to participate, we are finding that in these early days where communities are not necessarily familiar with IRMA, that some community members may not understand the value of participating. They may choose not to participate for a variety of reasons. And so we are hoping that as more people become aware of the value of the IRMA audits, that there will be an increased amount of participation in the audits. I also want to address the communities of interest relative to the mine and their relationship with the communities. Again, the mines are identifying who those communities are as a part of their assessment process, which starts early on in their environmental and social impact assessment, which is intended to be conducted by experts who can facilitate that process. IRMA strongly encourages communities who believe that they are interested communities or impacted communities to reach out to the mines and identify themselves and ask to be actively engaged or acknowledged as part of the process.
Thank you, Michelle, for the answer. The next question is for Javier. It comes from a member, Likan Kante, and the question is, why SQM cannot help the people of San Pedro de Atacama with renewable energy? Perfect. I believe this is what we're doing. We respect the self-determination we have been progressing in dialogues and agreements that are trying to improve quality of life of the inhabitants of the community. But we cannot impose what is that they need. We know the community is under a situation that has a lot of delay on basic services such as water, electricity, education, and health. But who determines the order of how they are affected is the community. We have some examples of communities we have worked in who already have renewable energy for them, thanks to the agreements they progressed with us. So it is a process that we're starting out and implementing for several years now, but the determination of the communities is also emerging. Thank you very much, Javier. Next question is for Aimee. So I'm going to read it in English.
I'm trying to make sure I understand the question there, Adan. They're saying, will you read it one more time for me, please? Okay, so I'm going to try to answer what I think is being asked, but to whoever asked this question, if I don't fully answer this, please ask again. So first of all, if a community does not believe, does not find credible the results in the audit, there is a way to provide feedback. That could be a question. Tell me more about, or what did the auditors see? Or I need to know what evidence they were looking at. So they can ask a question. You can provide a complaint. IRMA has a complaint and grievance system. We will take complaints and questions in any form. So you may use WhatsApp, you may use email. You can contact any of the staff that you see here so that you find someone that you feel comfortable with, and we're happy to provide greater information. More specifically to trusting the audit firms, there are currently only 2 audit firms who have been approved by IRMA to do audits. That's CVS, who did the SQM audit, and SCS Global. Their rights to do IRMA audits are conferred by IRMA. So while the company must pay the cost of it, they are selected by IRMA and trained by IRMA, and their credentials and expertise are overseen by IRMA. And IRMA can withdraw that approval if these auditors were not found to be competent or meeting the expectations of accountability to all stakeholder sectors. Having said this, it is a learning moment for all. Companies are still learning the IRMA standard and its system. Auditors are still learning how to audit the IRMA standard. There is no other standard for mining that is even close to being like IRMA. There is no other audit system that even publicly notices audits. Other audits that are happening are secret. So this is the one where the community is being publicly noticed to it. As Michelle spoke earlier, many community members, including Indigenous rights holders and workers, may not feel safe and comfortable to speak still yet. So we expect there are gaps in this, and we'd love to hear. And I expect that perhaps during the surveillance review and in SQM's next audit review, there'll be even more robust feedback. But there's no need to wait 1 year or 3 years for that feedback. You have contact to SQM right now. You have contact to IRMA staff to be responsive right now, and we will work to make sure that your questions, your concerns, complaints come either to improving the IRMA system or how auditors do their work, or SQM hears from you as well.
Next question is for Javier.
What are the areas that are being prioritized by SQM to improve over time? So the question is for me. So I think that we have different areas. We have in production, we need to have more technologies that allow lithium extraction in a different way from what we have been doing right now. Although we are the operation with the lowest water footprint and carbon footprint, we still have challenges to overcome because we need to be able to meet certain requirements, all the more those requirements that are expected from the communities. Communities expect that we extract without impact or with the least possible impact to the groundwater in the territory. We also need to improve our relationship with the communities. We need to recognize our responsibility on the territory. And as for governance, we need to continue to move forward our legacies for the future together with the board. And we need to report on any progress that we make. Well, thank you, Javier. There's another question for you. So what does it mean to have zero impact on water? Does this imply not using evaporation methods? Well, we have a program called Salar Futuro, and our goal is to have a supplementary operation that we are still assessing for technology. The processes that we know so far are processes that recover water. However, they need a lot of water to recover some water. So we need to continue testing. For in the last 2 years, we have implemented different technologies. It's more than 40 technologies that we are testing in on site. And what we want to do is to review the different technologies that we can use in the brine that we have in the Atacama Desert. So the goal is to combine technology so that we can replace the concentration process that comes from solar evaporation and then supplement it with the other technologies. We will not use fresh water anymore, and we will not use industrial water anymore, but we will bring water from the sea. And another question for Michelle and for Javier. And I am going to ask this question in Spanish. So I've seen that the audit encompasses lithium mining and lithium processing activities. However, it is unclear to me what are the portions of the audit that address lithium processing and lithium refining. Can you please make this clear? I don't know, Michelle, or Javier, if you can answer the question. Michelle, the floor is yours, if you will.
Javier, I think you should answer first, and then I'll follow up if there's anything else.
So the IRMA standard is specific for mining operations. And we are working on a standard for refineries. And based on our experience with the mine, we know that there are some cross-sectional topics that we need to make progress on. And this is why we are working on this refining standard. So we are including all practices in the every practice that is cross-sectional in our refining standard. So now we are awaiting only the final version of the standard, and then we will adapt. And we will adapt to the refining standard.
Thanks, Javier. And I will just follow that up and say that that IRMA currently has a finalized mining standard and a draft mineral processing standard. These standards have been integrated, and we will be releasing a draft version of that standard coming out hopefully before the end of this year. And that standard will be available for public comment to indicate if there are any places where we could improve the language of the standard, elevate the level of performance that is asked. The draft standard will have many consultation questions where we will be asking the public to provide their input on certain areas. Right now, the mining standard is often applied at sites where processing operations are co-located with the mining operations. But typically where processing operations occur remote or distant from the site, especially if they are, very independent operations, those are not currently covered in the IRMA when sites are audited against the IRMA mining standard.
The next question is for Javier. So the question is, why haven't the people of Atacama been consulted a bit of the Corfo SQM agreement? Because our territory is this territory that is going to be sacrificed. I'm not sure I understand the question very well. And can you ask again? So a member of a community is asking, why weren't the people of Atacama consulted about the Corfo SQM agreement? Because it involves our territory, which is going to be affected by that agreement. Well, the Corfo SQM agreement has to do with the company management, and it has to do with the social programs, and it's part of the rules of the game set up by the government. So Corfo SQM agreement is leasing agreement. As you all know, lithium is Chilean, but this agreement that was amended in 2018 allows for the operation of the companies. So everything that has to do with the contributions from the agreement to the communities were designed by the government. So the company is only responsible for what the company does, and that is over which we have some power to act, but the other is the responsibility of the government. Javier, we have overrun our time by 4 minutes, and we still have 2 questions. The next question is for Michelle and Aimee, and I'm going to ask a question in English.
Michelle, would you like to take this one or shall I take it?
I've got it.
Great.
Thank you for this question. We have opened up our audit firm applications to firms who would like to apply so that we can expand the capacity of audit firms to deliver audits against the IRMA standard. We limited this to 2 firms initially because we wanted to ensure that there was sufficient work to incentivize the audit firms to invest in the time that it takes to become familiar with the IRMA standard and to adopt what are different audit practices than what are often found out there in the world in other types of audits. And we have also had a great opportunity to learn side by side with the audit firms and with the mines that have participated in these early stages what the assurance process should look like. And we're taking those lessons learned and we'll be applying those as we train new audit firms. So we are looking forward to applications from audit firms who meet the qualifications. All the information is available on our website for how to apply. And we are looking forward to having expanded capacity as interest in IRMA is growing exponentially.
And for the companies coming in, we encourage you to come in. It takes time to prepare your self-assessment and be ready, as Javier has spoken. So please come in through support through Microsoft. We have a grant to make the self-assessment tool free to companies when they come in new to the IRMA system. So you can register, use that self-assessment tool, prepare and upload your evidence so that you are ready to go. And increased audit firms are also available to you. So there is no backlog that prevents you from engaging right now, and we encourage you to do so.
Well, Aimee, Michelle, thank you very much for your replies. And we are 7 minutes over the time that was allotted to us. So on behalf of IRMA, we are going to conclude this webinar, and we would like to express our appreciation to our panelists and to all the attendees who took the time to be here with us today. This webinar was recorded and we are going to share it in our website, and we are going to send the link to each of the participants who registered to attend this webinar. Thank you very much and see you soon. Have a nice rest of the day.